In this video, I'll help you answer the age-old question, do I really have to texture all of my miniature bases? So there's one general issue that I do frequently see when going through all the different Facebook miniature painting groups that I have a tendency to traverse through on any given day. And that problem is that someone works very hard to paint their model and make it look great, and then the base has got nothing on it, except maybe some overspill and a little extra paint, that just happened to slop onto it while they were working on the model. And then people in the comments will say, so what are you gonna do for the base? And they're always like, well, something, I'm gonna do that later. Basing, for a lot of people, is an afterthought. Many people don't enjoy it. Many people think, I'll just do it at the end once I've kind of figured out what I want to do. And I've done videos about that kind of thing before. I did a video about how you should always actually put the texture down, at least in my opinion, before you even start priming. Pachow. But man, basing is a big portion of your model. It can kind of tell a story. It can help tie the whole army together, man. And so you definitely want to not skip it, just like you shouldn't skip leg day, I hear. I don't really work out a lot, but you don't want to skip base day, let's just say that. Recently I was working on some Necrons, and I wanted them to be fighting in what I kind of thought of more of an urban sort of situation. I was going to be using them, I was making basically a group for Shadow War Armageddon, and now they're being brought into Kill Team. But again, it's the same type of deal. Like if you're playing on a very urban style industrial mat and your guys are all standing on, like dirt and sand, and there's flowers and squirrels and rabbits and stuff on their bases, looking all nice and happy, or dead, skeletal, whatever you're going to be doing with your particular look. You can do that, but it kind of seems to me to be a little jarring. So I was like, all right, I want to go urban. So then my first thought was well, what am I going to lay on top of the base to make it look like asphalt? I need to find the right material, maybe some green stuff and the right kind of little roller or something like that. But then I really started looking at the bases. If you look very closely at your average GW style base, plastic black base, they have a texture to them. They have a little bumpy texture to them. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking to myself, that kind of looks like it could be asphalt. I could just paint it kind of dark gray, throw a little wash, a little bit of dry brush, and right there it would look like they were standing on asphalt. And I thought, now I don't want to leave them that simple. I do want to do something a little bit more. If it's going to be sort of ruined or something like that kind of, I didn't want to break into the asphalt, but there could be buildings that have fallen down and some of the stuff has kind of sprinkled upon to the ground where the mighty, Necron warrior is standing, or, whatever, type of figure you want to use in an urban situation. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do? What if I just sprinkle a little bit of kitty litter or some sand in there, maybe throw in a little tiny scale model brick, which I have done in the past, and I've showed you how to make scale model bricks a long time ago. Pachow, again. And so I started doing that, and when I did that, I realized that it saved me a bunch of time because I only really had to texture just a little bit of the base, and the rest of it I kept basically untextured as far as, being textured by me. GW had already textured it, but it worked out quite well, and I think that they turned out pretty nice. Now, sometimes these black plastic bases will have kind of a divot right in the center, and it has something to do with the molding process. It's like where the plastic is injected in. And since you're normally kind of covering it all up with all kinds of crazy texture anyway, that usually gets covered. So in these situations, if you're trying to do this technique where you're really not putting much of anything on the base except a little bit of debris, I would tell you to put that little bit of debris right over that kind of bump or node or divot in the center of the base. Put it right over there. This technique is not going to work super awesome with slotted bases, frankly. You're going to end up having to probably put more texture into it. But if you're using a normal flat base, whether it's 32, 40 millimeter, whatever, even 25s, just a little bit of glue, CA glue, which I've talked about as well, because I wouldn't use PA or PVA glue in this situation, a little bit of CA glue, and then just sprinkle some of that stuff on there, a little bit of kitty litter or sand. I wouldn't even go to use the baking soda, like I did the video recently about that. The baking soda bases are great if you need to texture the entire thing, but in this situation, if you're trying to leave most of it and just have some some standout texture, you could easily do that just with a real quick kind of, like I said, just some kitty litter, or even, other stuff like rougher sand, salt you could probably use. If you wanted to do the entire thing, then yeah, go with the baking soda. But in this situation, I wouldn't go with that. If you haven't seen the baking soda video, pachow, triple pachow, you don't see those every day. But what this does is it allows you to just put a little bit of glue, a little bit of something in there to give a little bit of visual interest. Maybe you want to have some other type of cool debris that you might find. Maybe you throw a skull in there. Who knows? Get crazy. And then you can just basically paint that last, because you should always paint your bases last if they're attached. If your model is attached to your base, paint it last, because then any kind of stuff that comes off of the model and gets onto the base, you're going to cover up with that last bit when you finally paint it. But just having to do some dark gray, throw a black wash over it, go back with a little bit dark gray for dry brush, and then maybe a little bit of light gray dry brush on some of the raised parts of the tops of the little pieces of kitty litter or whatever you use, the edges of the bricks, and you've got really nice looking urban bases that are quick and easy. So for all those folks out there who love to paint but hate to base, take a look at doing this. If you just start putting your entire army onto urban bases, you can really save yourself an incredible amount of time by just having to just really put a little bit of texture, maybe a couple little pieces of something, a little piece of brick, a little skull, a little piece of debris, something like that, onto the thing, and then use the natural built-in texture that the bases have already in them as the texture of the asphalt. Now, if you want your asphalt to look all wrecked and cracked and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be a different story. This technique will not work in that situation. But if you want your bases to be super quick and you want it to look like nice, like decent looking asphalt with a little bit of debris on it, because, there's a war going on, think about not covering all of your bases in texture. Just doing a little bit here and there, some nice paint, some nice dry brushing, and you can move on to your next painted pieces and not spend so much time on basing.